Welcome to House Church, everyone. I'm Jared Anderson, and this is Engaging Gospel Doctrine, episode 361. And this will be a special episode about the House Church format, following the announcement that there will not be meetings in ward and stake meeting houses as we all do our best to manage this virus. So I look forward to doing this. I've been working a lot of the day to get this up, so it's timely. I will also do my best to integrate the worship experience into this podcast. I posted a meme on the Facebook page that said, "Keep calm and church from home." And as I said, I'm grateful that I can be a resource to help with that. Really quick check-in about podcast sustainability. There are not enough donations to keep the podcast sustainable, but I don't want anyone to worry about that right now. Let's take care of ourselves, take care of each other, make sure that the needs are met until a degree of normalcy returns, and then I hope that those who can donate to the podcast will. On my end, I will work as hard as I can to keep good content going. I hope that you've been able to feel an increased quality to the podcast and my efforts as I work to keep a good schedule, making my lessons even more scripture and gospel based, and so forth. The outline of this episode is we have an invitation to make our homes houses of worship. And there's some really cool historical precedents that we'll be talking about that. So in this episode, I want to talk about how everything is an invitation, what on earth is going on, strengths of the Come Follow Me curriculum, the history of House Church, recommendations for House Church, and then give some specific details about how we can have church at home in a meaningful way, including music, prayer, sacrament, and spiritual messages. And then I want to talk about individual spirituality and worship, and then I will conclude. And I want the take-home message, stay-at-home message, to be that we can be mindful, and this is an opportunity. It's a systems check and a life check. I know there are things that I definitely want to do differently, and I hope that we all can take this opportunity. I hope that we can lean in and grow into the new normal. Let's review the announcements that have prompted this house church model. These are all from the newsroom. Beginning immediately, all public gatherings of church members are being temporarily suspended worldwide until further notice. This includes stake conferences, leadership conferences, and other large gatherings, all public worship services, including sacrament meetings, branch, ward, and stake activities. Where possible, leaders should conduct any essential leadership meetings via technology. Specific questions may be referred to local priesthood leaders. Further direction related to other matters will be provided. Bishops should counsel with their stake president to determine how to make the sacrament available to members at least once a month. We encourage members in their ministering efforts to care for one another. We should follow the Savior's example to bless and lift others. We bear our witness of the Lord's love during this time of uncertainty. He will bless you to find joy as you do your best to live the gospel of Jesus Christ in every circumstance. General Conference. President Nelson was right that it will be like no other. Dear brothers and sisters, we are deeply concerned about the global spreading of illness caused by COVID-19. We have counseled with worldwide governmental, ecclesiastical, and medical leaders and have prayerfully considered the current circumstances. We want to be good global citizens and do what we can to control this contagious illness. We are grateful to the many who are working tirelessly to address this health hazard. We pray for them and for all who may be suffering. To help control this problem, we feel it wise to limit attendance at the upcoming 2020 General Conference. We plan to conduct all 5 sessions of that conference at the Conference Center. General authorities, general officers and their spouses, musicians, choirs, technicians, and others will participate as assigned. but the proceedings of the conference will be distributed through the world via technology only. The public will not be admitted in the conference center in Salt Lake City or in stake centers or meeting houses in areas where contagion is a concern. Questions about other large gatherings of church members will be answered in separate announcements. We live in a remarkable age. The Lord has blessed us with the technology and capacity to participate in and receive messages from church leaders in all parts of the world. This special conference will commemorate the bicentennial of the first vision and restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ in these latter days. We invite all to continue to prepare for this conference. As we do, we will be blessed to hear the word of the Lord and participate in a general conference experience that will remain not only memorable but unforgettable. Sincerely, the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And the most recent update is about temples, where government or other restrictions on public and or religious gatherings would in effect preclude temple activity. Proxy and living ordinances will temporarily be suspended. Where government or other restrictions do not preclude all temple activity, the following temple ordinances for living persons will be accommodated as capacity permits by appointment only. Husband and wife and child apparent sealing ordinances and living initiatory and endowment ordinances. On a temporary basis, proxy temple ordinances will not be performed. We are seeing a great example of the church updating and communicating quickly. I don't think that there's any better community I can think of than the church when it comes to disaster communication and organization. So I'm very grateful for this. Now to the Engaging Gospel Doctrine contribution. I am seeing all of this as an invitation to make our homes a house of worship. Functionally, we are making our houses temples, houses of the Lord, houses of worship. And I think that we will be blessed as we do this. First and foremost, I hope that everyone's immediate needs are taken care of as well as possible. It has been scary and sobering to see the rushes on stores. I really hope that we are able to restock medicine. I highly recommend little portable bidet bottles. I'm installing a bidet on the toilet. I haven't gotten that finished because evidently there was a run on toilet paper. And I admit that I've been making fun of the run on toilet paper, but I'll explain it in just a moment. There's this really funny meme where the CDC says, prepare for a viral outbreak. And the people say, okay, I'll stock up. And the CDC says, yeah, some hand sanitizer, disinfectant, medication would be useful. And the people say, I'm going to buy toilet paper and water. And the CDC says, no, I mean, you'll be able to go out, just wash your hands and be mindful of cleanliness. And the people are like, I'll stay home until the snow is gone. And the CDC's like, there's no storm. This is a viral outbreak. Now, that's funny, but the human reality underlying this humor is not funny at all. And it's the fact that we panic easily. We're very limited. And so we do the best we can to grab things. I don't know in particular why like toilet paper and bottled water are people's concern, but it is a very understandable human impulse to prepare. And this is why the church has been counseling us for decades to have food storage, be prepared, live in a sustainable way. And that's not an excuse to be self-righteous. But again, this is a systems check, an individual check-in on how we're doing. And as President Nelson and the apostles said, I hope that we can take this opportunity to minister to each other. I've been checking in with my children and loved ones. I'll admit that I'm most concerned about my quadriplegic brother because this is a respiratory illness, and quadriplegics are fragile when it comes to respiratory issues. Okay, context is everything. We've been hearing these messages for years and decades, but now it feels different. It feels real because it is. Everything is an invitation. This is the most helpful shift I've experienced and practiced to see everything as an invitation to grow, to show up, to live. And I'm not diminishing the seriousness of this in any way. It is very serious. I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But I want to contextualize this and engage it. Disruption, here's one of the take-home messages that I hope you can feel and consider. Disruption is one of the most powerful invitations to grow and change. Updating is a superpower of mine. And for the past 48 hours I've been feeling a great deal of grief, like world grief and system grief. I grieve that we're not better prepared. I grieve that our leadership is largely incompetent. President Trump dismantled our pandemic preparation years ago. We're not doing well. We're not preparing nearly as well as other countries. I've mostly metabolized this grief and frustration, and I'm ready to contribute as best as I can. I went to the prison this morning. I posted that there will not be any trainings. I ran into Mac Wilberg, the director of the Tabernacle Choir, and I am going to create an online training. I posted notices about inmates and worship. I really hope my hospice job, I won't be visiting anyone, but I'm going to be keeping in touch over the phone and help managing anxiety. And those are just some personal examples of how I'm managing in my job. And as you can see with this episode, I am going to step up with the Sunday School podcast so it can be a house church podcast. This is something that I've been wanting to do, and this is a motivation. I want to read a little bit from one of my very favorite books of all time, Jonathan Haidt's The Happiness Hypothesis. This is a popular, readable, understandable book about how happiness works, how humans work. Quote, "This is the adaptation principle at work." So that the take home is that when there's a disruption in life, it says, I'll get to this. It says, if in those first few months after disruption, you take action, you do something that changes your daily life, then the changes might stick. But if you do nothing more than make a resolution, I must never forget my new outlook on life, then you will soon slip back into old habits and pursue old goals. So the best thing, and this is an approach that I repeat again and again with hospice and prison, is the only thing we can do with difficulty and challenge and even tragedy in our life is spend it. We can't change it. We can only spend it and live better than we have before. However, I literally deal with people who are actively dying, and it's never too late to make changes. It's never too late for one good day. So let me talk about this. This is the adaptation principle at work. Humans are incredibly adaptive, for better and worse. People's judgments about their present state are based on whether it is better or worse than the state to which they have become accustomed. Adaptation is in part just a property of neurons. Nerve cells respond vigorously to new stimuli, but generally they habituate, firing less to stimuli that they have become used to. It is change that contains vital information, not steady states. Human beings, however, take adaptation to cognitive extremes. We don't just habituate, we recalibrate. We create for ourselves a world of targets, and each time we hit one, we replace it with another. After a string of successes, we aim higher. After a massive setback, such as a broken neck, we aim lower. He's talking about a study that showed that lottery winners and paraplegics all returned to the similar levels of happiness in 6 months. So we get used to the new normal. That's the short, easy way to summarize all this. Instead of following Buddhist and Stoic advice to surrender attachments and let events happen, we surround ourselves with goals, hopes, and expectations, and then feel pleasure and pain in relation to our progress. When we combine the adaptation principle with the discovery that people's average level of happiness is highly heritable, That's the happiness set point. So basically, we inherit, we're like air conditioners or thermostats, and we inherit our happiness set point. My happiness and sadness set point is about a 7 or 8. I've repeated before that I have bipolar genes, and so it makes sense that both my capacity for happiness and sadness is very, very high. So I've had to manage that. We come to a startling possibility. Along with the discovery that people's average level of happiness is highly heritable, we come to a startling possibility. In the long run, it doesn't matter what happens to you. This is liberating information. In the long run, it doesn't much matter what happens to you. Good fortune or bad, you will always return to your happiness set point, your brain's default level of happiness, which was determined largely by your genes. So basically, figure out how happy you are, how sad you are, and get used to it. Don't expect anything else. Resilience is the real golden target. Good fortune or bad, you will largely return to your happiness set point, your brain's default level of happiness, which was determined largely by your genes. In 1759, long before anyone knew about genes, Adam Smith reached the same conclusion. In every permanent situation where there is no expectation of change, the mind of every man, in a longer or shorter time, returns to its natural and usual state of tranquility. In prosperity, after a certain time, it falls back to that state. In adversity, after a certain time, it rises up to it. End quote. From Adam Smith. Back to Jonathan Haidt. If this idea is correct, then we are all stuck on what has been called the hedonic treadmill. On an exercise treadmill, you can increase the speed all you want, but you stay in the same place. In life, you can work as hard as you want and accumulate all the riches, fruit trees, and concubines you want, but you can't get ahead. He's not recommending concubines. He's alluding to older, earlier wisdom. Because you can't change your natural and usual state of tranquility, the riches you accumulate will just raise your expectations and leave you no better off than you were before. Yet, not realizing the futility of our efforts, we continue to strive, all the while doing things that help us win at the game of life. Always wanting more than we have, we run and run and run and run like hamsters on a wheel. But here is why I'm talking about this. In this house church episode, as we are all anxious and stressed and scared about our jobs, about the virus, and even about the life and death of our loved ones. I'll get to the virus in just a moment, but this is a very serious situation. We will get used to this. This will become a new normal. And I'm very hopeful that this is a healthy amount of wake-up call. As the best estimates that I can see is this is going to disrupt our lives for a couple months. And the biggest concern is that it will bankrupt more people than it will kill. I'll provide several links to that. And what I am seeing more than anything, my passion is looking at how things function and looking at patterns. I'm not an expert on statistics or anything, but I'm fascinated by human nature and systems, is that our current system of global, exploitative, consumeristic capitalism is completely unsustainable. And we need to look at that. I was listening to a Joe Rogan episode that I'll link to, and the guest made a very disturbing point that most of our saline bags, which are one of the most urgent things we need in a crisis, are all made in one particular factory in Panama, I think it was. And our globalized, incredibly fast transport interconnected system has resulted in tremendous wealth, but it's also resulted in tremendous inequality and fragility. And this virus is a check-in and wake-up call around that. So back to the happiness hypothesis. When tragedy strikes, however, it knocks you off the treadmill and forces a decision. Hop back on and return to business as usual, or try something else. There is a window of time, just a few weeks or months after the tragedy, during which you are more open to something else. I'm going to say that again. There is a window of time, just a few weeks or months after the tragedy. We are experiencing this disruption right now. Right now, all of us are wondering, how are we going to take care of our children? How are we going to get food and medicine in the home? How are we going to pay our rent? This is the moment of disruption. There is a window of time, just a few weeks or months after the tragedy, during which you are more open to something else. And I would add, this something else is sustainable gospel living. During this time, achievement goals often lose their allure, sometimes coming to seem pointless. If you shift toward other goals, family, religion, or helping others, you shift to inconspicuous consumption, and the pleasures derived along the way are not fully subject to adaptation treadmill effects. In brief, this is why spirituality and religion are more satisfying and sustainable than the current global religion of consumerism, dissatisfaction-based consumerism. Now you understand why I love social science and systems so much. The pursuit of these goals, therefore, leads to more happiness but less wealth on average. Many people change their goals in the wake of adversity. They resolve to work less, to love and play more. I'll say that again, many people change their goals in the wake of adversity. They resolve to work less, to love and play more. If in those first few months you take action, you do something that changes your daily life, then the changes might stick. But if you do nothing more than make a resolution, I must never forget my new outlook on life, then you will slip soon back into old habits and pursue old goals. The writer, in the Happiness Hypothesis, he has this wonderful description of human nature, is that we are like humans on an elephant, human riders on an elephant. The human rider is the prefrontal cortex that we think makes the decisions. The elephant is the rest of our brain and human nature. So as long as the elephant is happy and content, as long as the elephant is not scared or hungry or tired, the human rider can make the elephant go where it wants. But heaven forbid, when that elephant is scared. And this is why when we are scared or hungry or tired or other things, we're not thinking like a human. We're thinking like a lizard or an elephant at best. The rider can exert some influence at forks in the road, but the elephant handles daily life, responding automatically to the environment. One of the most sobering things I've learned in my studies is that we are as good as we are incentivized and empowered to be. Even briefer, we are as good as our contexts. So what we can do is we can create an environment, and the coronavirus is currently disrupting our environments in very, very big ways. And I'm hopeful that as we get back to the new normal, within a couple months, we will keep using our bidets. We will keep, one goal that I have is, and I was already shifting toward this just sounds like the gospel, right? I mean, this is human nature. I was just telling my brother, my older brother, not my younger one with quadriplegia. My older brother is bipolar, and he said, "You have Dad's genius, I have Dad's diagnosis," and I'm really grateful for our relationship. This is an invitation to live in a different way, and all of this. So, what I was telling my brother is that one of the most sobering, hopeful things I've ever learned is that life is mostly made of small moments and small decisions. And so for example, I'm really grateful that I did a grocery run about a week ago. And the fact that I made a grocery run about a week ago versus now makes all the difference. I tried to do an Amazon food order and everything was out of stock. And so I hope that moving forward, we can make these sustainable choices. So for example, I'm not at a year's supply, but one of my sustainability goals is that I want to be able to comfortably eat about a month at a time. So one purchase that I just got is a sprouter. and sprouting lentils and sprouting wheat is one of the most efficient ways to nourish ourselves when we can't get to the store all of the time. So it's just so amazing. I have more quotes in the lesson notes. Let's talk about the coronavirus and what is going on. It's not hype. How the coronavirus is functioning is that it is inviting those of us in industrialized nations into the way of life that many people in the world feel every day. Many people don't have reliable access to food and medicine. Half of the world lives on less than $2 a day. So this is an invitation into anxiety. And I hope that we can be more compassionate as a result and not less compassionate, because disruption and tragedy shows us our true character and our true nature. So are we hoarding and becoming more selfish, or are we becoming more generous? And the invitation of the gospel is that even in extreme situations, and especially in extreme situations, we are Christ-like and we truly live and internalize the gospel. So one thing that has helped me feel very compassionate about all people is the awareness that we're not so much good or bad, we're mostly overwhelmed. So the way I summarize human nature is that we are all small, selfish, and social. By small, I mean we're limited. And we get overwhelmed really, really easily. And that's why people buy toilet paper. Because when we are in panic mode, we don't think ahead. So when people started stockpiling toilet paper and bottled water, I did an online order and I went to the store and I bought broth, potatoes, grains, medicine, and so forth. Things that I will genuinely need to get. But it's not productive to laugh at people. I mean, it's funny. But again, when we're in those panic moments, we'll go to these default behaviors. And so one luxury is that I really enjoy cooking. And I do generally, so my understanding of the food storage principle is that we don't have these big buckets of wheat for 20 years, which is great. We cook and eat and live day to day and week to week in a way where we're cycling through our food storage. So that's a benefit that I have with the way that I have trained myself to eat. We are selfish, and by that I mean we only have access to our own perceptions. We are the only ones real to us. And even more disturbingly, the stories we tell about ourselves are more real than our reality. And that's why therapists and our children and our spouses often have a more accurate assessment of what we are really like than we do. That's one of the paradoxes of human nature, is that only we can experience and perceive what we do, which is why feelings are facts, and we all live in the prisons of our own perception. But at the same time, that prison of our perception only we have access to our feelings, but we are constantly lying to ourselves. And that's why the redemption of human nature is social. And because we are social beings, we can constantly check in with each other and update. And so one of the things that I've most carefully cultivated in my training as a minister is, I mentioned in an earlier episode that when I was talking to the Huntsman Cancer Institute chaplain, he highlighted and flagged as one of the most important impulses this feedback impulse, this accountability impulse. And that is something that I'm very grateful that I've cultivated, which is whenever anyone gives me any feedback, I say, oh, is that true? Like I was talking to a friend earlier as I was preparing this episode, and she commented on whether I'm intimidated by people. And I don't think that I am intimidated by people in general. And she said, oh, that's your ego speaking if you don't think you're intimidated by people. And I checked in and I'm like, oh, is that true? What does intimidation mean? I don't think I am intimidated by people. because I think that intimidation is a fear avoidance response. And a lot of this is just semantics, which is why conversation is helpful. I am in awe of people very often, and I seek out people who are world class. I just love, love, love excellence and people who are world class, and I try to spend time with them. And I love finding what people are amazing at. Okay, back to the coronavirus. So systems make decisions and humans feel the consequence. Systems make decisions, humans feel the consequence. All of us are feeling that very intensely right now. We are all limited by the options that our jobs, our schools, the government, and et cetera gives us. We do the best we can within those limitations. So I'm very, very grateful that I can do my job, via the phone. As best as I can tell, my jobs will be sustainable over the next few months. Even if I had to stay home mostly. And I know that's not the case. I mean, I literally am producing this podcast from my living room. I'm also very lonely, given where my life is right now. I reached out to a friend and said, I'm really glad that you have a cat. I wish I had a pet right now, but I don't need to worry about pet food. So trade-offs. Systems make decisions, humans feel the consequence. I think COVID-19, the coronavirus, is a wake-up call and systems check, and we're failing. It is serious. Cases double about every 4 days, and things will get very hard over the next few months. Many of us will get the virus, and the elderly are especially vulnerable. So the goal is not so much to not get sick. The goal is to flatten the curve. I've put this in my notes. The goal is to flatten the curve so that the healthcare facilities and workers can handle the cases that do go to the hospital. So if we are not careful, if we don't wash our hands very, very carefully, if we don't self-isolate, if we don't cancel everything like church worship services, what is going to happen, and I'll talk about this more in a minute, one of the limitations, one of the ways that we're small as humans is that we simply cannot understand exponential growth. Our brains can't compute exponents. I've heard that baboons can count to 3. Baboons count 1, 2, 3 lots. And as humans, we can count more than that. Maybe we're like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 lots. But the very specific thing that we can't understand is exponential growth. There's this amazing story, I think it's Chinese in origin, where this inventor dazzled the king or the emperor with a game. The inventor dies in the end. But the emperor says, "This is wonderful. How can I reward you?" And he says, "All I want," I think it was like a chessboard. And he said, "All I want is 1 grain of rice. 1 grain of rice, and then 2 grains of rice on the next square, and then 4 grains of rice the next square, and then 8, and then 16, and so forth, doubling each time." And by the time you get a couple in, you're into like the quintillions. I mean, it's crazy. So if we are not careful, we will get sick at such a catastrophic level that the healthcare facilities will not be able to handle it. And this is the case currently in Italy. Now, Italy has a particularly elderly population. So do temple workers. And so what's happening right now, the healthcare workers in China and Italy are describing it like a war zone where they have to do triage, and they are literally choosing who to allow to just let die and who to treat. Whereas if we can be very, very careful and flatten the curve, most of us will still get sick. Many of us will still get sick. Children largely won't get it. People in our 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s will feel like fluish for about a week, and then we'll get better. And the elderly are particularly susceptible. And those with other health issues are particularly susceptible. So take this seriously. This is an instance where we need everything. And this is one of the take-homes of this episode. We need everything. We need science. We need the gospel. We need humanity. As I said, I don't think there's any better network in a crisis than the LDS Church. And let's do the best we can to keep checking in and with each other. So this is a couple links that I'm sharing. This is from a BBC article. While public health workers are one of the groups with the highest risk of infection, they also fall foul of another systemic issue in the U.S. under spotlight during this crisis: the fact that there is no requirement for American employers to offer paid sick leave. I'm really worried for my patients that can't take time off work to come and get care and who will go to work even when they are sick because they have no other way to pay for their food and utilities. Coronavirus does not change that. So remember, systems make decisions. Humans feel the consequences. One thing that we're really seeing with some companies versus others, I'm trying to remember which ones are doing this, is there are companies who say, we will pay you, like, stay home if you're sick, we will pay you the same, and that is how you take care of everyone. Whereas the people who have to come into work, whether they're sick or not, will contribute to this pandemic. This is from a Washington Post article. And this is what I meant about exponential growth. One of the biggest problems with human nature is we aren't wired to understand exponential growth. The impact of COVID-19 doubles every 4 days. We won't see how, and this is why I said we won't see how serious this is for months. This is from the Washington Post article. There's an old brain teaser that goes like this. You have a pond of a certain size, and upon that pond, a single lily pad. This particular species of lily pad reproduces once a day, so that on day 2 you have 2 lily pads, on day 3 you have 4, and so on. Now the teaser. If it takes the lily pad 48 days to cover the pond completely, how long will it take for the pond to be covered halfway? The answer is 47 days. At day 40, you'll barely know the lily pads are there. But go back to those lily pads. When something dangerous is growing exponentially, everything looks fine until it doesn't. In the early days of the Wuhan epidemic, when no one was taking precautions, the number of cases appears to have doubled every 4 to 5 days. Really quick, the Joe Rogan episode talks about this. This is not a government conspiracy. This is not made by humans. Mother Nature can create these things way faster. I mean, microbes are billions of years old, or over 1 billion years old. I've shared before one of my favorite interactions with my 11-year-old Asher. He was 10 at the time. I said, Asher, what is humans' nemesis? And I wanted to say, aha, microbes. You know, these little tiny bacteria and viruses that can take us down, take our entire civilization down. And he said, ourselves. And I think he's right. Microbes can take us down, but it is human behavior that determines whether sickness is catastrophic, pandemic, and so forth. And that is where we are right now. We are right now at that crisis point. We are right now at that point of decision, which is why I am issuing this episode today. The crisis in northern Italy is what happens when a fast doubling rate meets a threshold effect, where the character of an event can massively change once its size hits a certain threshold. In this case, the threshold is things such as ICU beds. If the epidemic is small enough, doctors can provide respiratory support to the significant fraction of patients who develop complications, and relatively few will die. But once the number of critical patients exceeds the number of ventilators and ICU beds and other critical care facilities, the mortality rate spike. Daniele Maccini, a doctor in Bergamo, Italy, recently posted a heart-stopping account to Facebook of what he and his colleagues have endured. The hospital emptying out, the wards eerily silent as they waited for the patients they couldn't believe would come, and then the tsunami. Again, this is the exact same pattern as in disaster, as in war. This is Dr. Maccini's quote. One after the other, the departments that had been empty, because they converted everything to like respiratory care. One after the other, the departments that had been emptied fill up at an impressive pace. The boards with the names of the patients of different colors depending on the operating unit are now all red. And instead of surgery, you see the diagnosis, which is always the damned same: bilateral interstitial pneumonia. A British healthcare worker shared a message from the doctor in Italy who alleged that COVID-19 patients in their hospital who are over 65 or have complicating conditions aren't even being considered for the most intensive forms of supporting treatment. In other words, in Wuhan, in China, in Italy, and we are going to get here very soon in the United States, the hospitals are responding in this disaster, war, cataclysmic level where they have to triage and assess of who to treat and who to let die. And this is why we are sheltering in place. This is why we are isolating socially. This is why we are shifting to digital media, to flatten the curve. And the curve means that exponential growth of instances, so that it's not to prevent people from getting sick. People will get sick. It is so that we can keep pace. And similar with the store rushes of people behaving irresponsibly, the thing that we should hope for when it comes to food and medicine is that we will update, remember that human nature adaptability, that we will update to this sustainable care. So in sum, keep calm, wash your hands, isolate as much as possible, take care of yourself and others. This is an invitation to greater presence and awareness. As many scriptures say, wake up. If you are prepared, you shall not fear. Don't panic, but do be careful, do be mindful. Okay, what does this have to do with house church? This cannot be overemphasized, which is why I talked so much about human nature, the COVID-19 virus, and the intersection of human nature and COVID-19 virus. That conversation with Asher. How do humans respond in the face of pandemic? Listen to our church leaders. The strengths of the Come Follow Me curriculum. Isn't it interesting that President Nelson has been focusing on a home worship model supplemented by the church? Here are a couple quotes. Deep and lasting conversion to Heavenly Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. This is Elder Cook's announcement of the Come Follow Me material. Church leaders have been working for a long time on a home-centered and church-supported plan to learn doctrine, strengthen faith, and foster greater personal worship. President Nelson then announced an adjustment to achieve a new balance and connection between gospel instruction in home and in the church. Then another conference talk, Come Follow Me, the Lord's counter strategy and proactive plan. This was last year. We see Latter-day Saints everywhere growing in faith and devotion to the Lord Jesus Christ. This is talking about the consequences of this Come Follow Me home-centered, church-supplemented program. We see individuals and families setting aside time throughout the week to study the words of the Savior. We see improving gospel instruction in our Sunday classes as we study the scriptures at home and share our insights at church. We see greater family joy and unity as we have moved from simply reading the scriptures to studying the scriptures in a profound way. It has been my privilege to visit with many Latter-day Saints and hear firsthand of their experiences with Come Follow Me. Their expressions of faith fill my heart with joy. Here are just a few of the comments I have heard from various members of the church in different parts of the world. A father shared, "I enjoy Come Follow Me as it provides an opportunity to testify of the Savior to my children." In another home, a child said, "This is a chance to hear my parents bear their testimonies." A mother shared, "We have been inspired as to how to put God first. The time we thought we didn't have has been filled with hope, joy, peace, and success in ways we didn't know were possible." A couple observed, "We are reading the scriptures entirely differently than we have ever read them before. We are learning so much more than we have ever learned before. The Lord is wanting us to see things differently. The Lord is preparing us." Remember, this is last year. A mother remarked, "I love what we are learning the same things together. Before we were reading it, today we are learning it." A sister shared this insightful perspective. "Before you had the lesson and the scriptures supplemented it. Now you have the scriptures and the lesson supplements it." Another sister commented, I feel a difference when I do it compared to when I don't. I find it is easier to talk to others about Jesus Christ and our beliefs. A grandmother remarked, I call my children and grandchildren on Sundays and we share insights from Come Follow Me together. A sister observed, Come Follow Me feels like the Savior is personally ministering to me. It is heaven inspired. I want to add my testimony that one thing I've learned from hospice work is that it is our intimate family relationships that count the most. I have felt motivated and inspired to talk to my mom more, to talk to my siblings more, to reach out to my family more. And I hope that as we shift to this online interaction and this home-based ministering approach, we will nurture and strengthen the relationships that are very most important to us and that are the easiest to overlook. So this can be a tremendous opportunity. So now I'll talk about the history of house church. Here is something fun and meaningful to think about. House and home church is how Christianity began, and we can go far, far earlier than that, talking about the gospel and spirituality around the fire pit or the hearth is likely the most common way of sharing the gospel and spirituality in the entire history of humanity. That is why the symbol of civilization is the hearth, the fire pit. Everything centers around the fire pit. And with this home-based Come Follow Me approach, we are returning to the fire pit and nurturing those relationships. And I really think that that will pay off. So I want to read from the first urban Christians. This is a fun, nerdy resource about the beginnings of early Christianity. One cannot read far in the letters of Paul and his disciples without discovering that it was concern about the internal life of the Christian groups in each city that prompted most of the correspondence. The letters also reveal that those groups enjoyed an unusual degree of intimacy, high levels of interaction among members, and a very strong sense of internal cohesion and of distinction from both the outsiders and from the world. The aim of this chapter and the next is to describe the social structure of those groups. The Pauline congregations belonging to the category studied extensively by modern sociologists, especially American sociologists, and called small groups or simply groups. And this is what we are now creating with this Come Follow Me approach. We are returning to this house church small group model. George Hohmann's definition is representative and has the virtue of simplicity. A number of persons or members, each of whom, while the group is meeting, interacts with every other, or is able to do so, or can at least take personal cognizance of every other. Although my purpose is not sociological but historical, the sorts of questions these sociologists ask, even though they deal with almost exclusively with groups in modern industrial democracies, are helpful in suggesting the order of our inquiry. In this chapter, we shall deal with matters that are more basic, I believe, but also more elusive than the process of organization of the group. What makes a group a group? How does it come together, and how does it hold together? These questions have to do with sentiments and attitudes, with perceptions and expectations, as much with overt structure. It is especially in these realms that the historian needs to be the most wary about making anachronistic assumptions about behavior. Let's see, he's talking about methodology. We shall canvass the letters for evidence of how the early Christians regarded their own groups. In particular, we shall seek the factors that contributed to their sense of belonging to a distinct group and the ways in which they distinguished that group from the social environment. Indeed, the question of just how far they did distinguish and separate it is as important as the question of how they did so. One peculiar thing, I have a really hard time saying that word, peculiar thing about early Christianity was the ways in which the intimate, close-knit life of the local groups was seen to be simultaneously part of a much larger, indeed ultimately worldwide movement or entity. Hence, we must also investigate the ways in which that trans-local sensibility was generated and reinforced. Why am I reading you this academic work with lots of big words? It is because the early Christians thrived in the exact context that we are in right now, where there are small groups, house churches, with a larger sense of interconnection and identity. This is the exact state we are in right now, and what I want to model and shift to, kind of up my game with Engaging Gospel Doctrine. Instead of welcome to Sunday school, it's welcome to house church. And I hope that you can support the podcast at a level where I can do that, but I'll do my best. So let's talk about the household. The meeting places of the Pauline groups and probably of most other early Christian groups were private houses. So this is something that we forget. Most church groups with earliest Christianity were homes, and that is what we're returning to right now. So the home is the basic cell of that. So this is Wayne Meeks, who's an amazing scholar. This is why it says not every member of a household also became a Christian when its head did, as the case of Onesimus shows. But this is why it talks about the household. The household of X was converted. The household was the main unit in Greco-Roman society. And one of my hopes from this current chapter of house-based worship is that our homes and our families and our groups and our friends, our family of choice, will become much closer and tight-knit. Not coincidentally, I'll stop reading this, not coincidentally, one of the greatest tragedies of modern society is the loss of community, the loss of connection. And high-cost religion is one of the exceptions to this rule. So as a rule, people who live in the United States and modern industrialized communities, well, communities used lightly, we are isolated, and this is a large source of suicides. So many people are killing themselves because we have the worst case combination of an incredible, an overwhelming level of superficial connection. So we feel a great deal of comparison, we feel a great deal of shame, but we have very, very little strong, close-knit social support. What makes the biggest difference when you are having a really hard time is whether you have one person checking in on you. So be that one person. Check in with your people. It will make a difference, and it's always a matter of life and death. Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty recommendations for house church. That's some of the what and why and when. Let's talk about how. So having church at home, I recommend that you set aside a particular time and make it as formal and consistent, as you can. So for example, say, we are going to be meeting at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. every Sunday, and we are going to follow this structure. I have faith that this will strengthen our relationship among our family and family of choice. Music, there are several options. You can sing together, you can ask individual members to perform, you can listen to performances. These are things that I do in hospice visits. In the episodes to come, I will make recommendations about all of these. Prayer, be real and honest and genuine in your prayers. Pray together, assign someone to pray. So the sacrament, as I read, the official statement from the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles is that local leaders will make sure that all members have access to the sacrament at least once a month. I received an email from my Elders Quorum president that said all priesthood leaders are authorized to distribute the sacrament, to keep it sacred, take it seriously. And he requested that we check in with the bishopric as to when we're going to do this, who's going to do this. So there's that accountability and oversight. And I imagine most of you have gotten recommendation on how to do that. So spiritual messages, assign them in advance, have people prepare, listen to this podcast. As I said, I will do as much as I can to make Engaging Gospel Doctrine a nourishing resource around which you can build this house church model. So again, keep structure, hold it at the same time, plan your meetings maybe a week in advance. Figure out, are we going to sing together? Is someone going to sing individually? Are you going to listen to a performance? Be authentic in your prayers. Follow your local leader's advice about how to partake of the sacrament. And then assign and deliver spiritual messages. And finally, I hope that we can use this as an opportunity to strengthen our own individual spirituality and worship. I think one of the great potential benefits of this time of crisis is that we are stretched and challenged, and so we discover and exercise strengths that we may not have been aware we have. Take this time and time off, if you are fortunate to have it, to study, to pray, to meditate, and to nurture your relationship with God. I am blown away because given how my work schedule is shifting and the fact that I'm largely stuck at home, I am going to make huge leaps in my goals relating to the podcast, relating to ministry, relating to, applying to divinity school and so forth. Take this time to nurture yourself. As I've delivered this lesson, I really do believe that the greatest potential outcome of this disruption is that we will strengthen our relationship with ourselves, with God, and with those close to us. And that is literally the purpose of the gospel. I will work to incorporate these elements into future episodes of Engaging Gospel Doctrine. I'm also looking into ways that we can create a virtual congregation, whether it's Facebook Live, Zoom, and so forth. I will figure that out with upcoming episodes. I want to conclude with a quote from C.S. Lewis on pandemics and other horrors. In one way, we may think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb. How are we to live in an atomic age? I am tempted to reply, why, as you would have lived in the 16th century when the plague visited London almost every year, or as you would have lived in a Viking age when raiders from Scandinavia might land and cut your throat any night, or indeed as you are already living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics, but we have that still. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. This is the first point to be made, and the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we are all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things, praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, pint of root beer, for you listeners, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies, a microbe can do that, but they need not dominate our minds. So in conclusion, in this moment of disruption and crisis, I pray that we all will lean and grow into the normal, into the new normal, that we will stay human, that we will stay Christ-like. And again, I hope that this will wake us all up to the reality that we are all living in the shadow of death, that at any moment, any of us could befall disaster, catastrophe, sickness, paralysis. And I hope that as we move forward, we will implement practices that will take care of ourselves better, take care of each other better and increase our compassion and good policy and procedure that will take care of civilization and all of the children of our heavenly parents. Thank you for joining me for this special episode of House Church. As I said, I will up my game, and future episodes, I will design them so that if you choose, you can hold House Church around them. Thank you.